Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the self-titled debut album from Jungle. But first, let's talk a little bit about disco. Now, as a genre, it tends to have a lot worse of a reputation than it really deserves for a lot of the wrong reasons. It was scorned primarily because it was dance music made primarily by producers instead of songwriters. But then again, we live in an era where EDM has become one of the hottest selling genres worldwide. Sort of a common element there. And it was hated because it was electronic and synthetic and it felt plastic. In other words, just like every other genre that's touched pop music in the mainstream for over the past 20 years. And there's some quality there too. And it was loathed because it emerged from the gay dance club scene, and thus the backlash that had been seething against that music and much of the black culture that had supported the jazz, funk, and soul of its roots finally had an outlet to explode against it. And you know, I shouldn't even have to tell you why that backlash is at best misguided and at best moronic. If we're looking for a more legitimate reason why disco died in the late 70s and early 80s, same reason that any music trend dies. Musical evolution in sound and style and just sheer overexposure. But given the current musical and political climate, and especially the resurgence of neo-soul, dance music, and even some reggae-inspired tracks on the charts, it wasn't exactly a surprise that acts began jumping towards a new incarnation of disco both last year and this year. Even in the underground, where with the rise of the internet, it has never been easier for unknown acts to snag chart smash hits. So with that comes Jungle, a band that began as a viral sensation in 2013 before signing to XL and dropping a debut album that they described as mid-tempo, 70s inspired funk. Now that, if anything, was enough to attract my interest, even though some of those early reviews suggested that it was more towards disco than funk, but regardless, I gave that self-titled debut a couple of listens. How'd it turn out? Ugh, man, I don't know what I was expecting because, well, now I know why the hype for this band seems to have completely evaporated seemingly overnight, because this album just did not click with me whatsoever. And while I'm quite certain some of it's my own personal taste for certain brands of funk and soul and disco, the other part is that this album is a real definite disappointment for me, which is kind of impressive because I barely had any expectations going into this record in the first place. What we get instead is one of the more odd misfires of this year thus far. A record with a lot of disparate elements and a defiantly unique sound, but one that more I think about it just simply does not work, at least for me. And to explain why, we're gonna have to start with the instrumentation and the production, which is nowhere near even anything close to the soulful energy or vigor of funk, or even the more languid tempo and energy of G-funk. Instead, we get this odd fusion of these dark bass riffs, extremely varied yet very stiff percussion, tepid and flat organ lines, and a watery yet somehow very atmospheric blend of electronics and fuzz just dumped all over the mix. It definitely creates the atmosphere of a jungle, the hot, humid, oppressive reek of a jungle in the middle of the summer, and it's about the furthest thing that from a dance vibe that I've encountered in a really long time. It really doesn't help matters that the production shoves most of the bass lines near the back of the mix in favor of these oily synth melodies, which, in all fairness, are actually pretty well composed if they were given a more of a tight mix, which instead is overstuffed with effects and clattering noise that seems superficial and creates plenty of atmosphere but nothing close to a decent groove. But even on the songs that do get a solid groove, the guitar lines sound drowned out, and the keyboard lines seem much better fit for a chill wave or dark wave track than anything on this record. So okay, maybe Jungle's looking to go for more of a vibe that's darker or sinister or gothic, a vibe that's completely compromised by the vocals, which are most reminiscent of the fast-paced falsetto of the Bee Gees. Now, history hasn't exactly painted a kind picture of the Bee Gees' musical output, but you know what? At their best, they wrote some phenomenally tight disco and some decent psychedelic pop in the late 60s, but what they never were was gothic or dark, at least not in this mold, and for very good reason. It's hard to have that edgy sexual presence with a falsetto unless you're Prince, and Jungle isn't within spitting distance of that sort of personality and charisma. Now granted, the lyrics really don't help matters because this is where Jungle's weaknesses are especially highlighted. On top of not exactly being interesting songwriters beyond the typical perpetual horniness in this brand of dance music, which is fine by the way, the songwriting is often borderline inept, or sure as hell is not creating an attractive tone or all that much variance in their metaphors and wordplay. wordplay, even in the dark moodiness of acts like Depeche Mode, who really have this sort of thing down to an art. Part of this is helped by the general tone of the vocal delivery, which can come across more than a little bit pissy and a little bit grating, a little insufferable. But the lyrics, they don't hold up to much either here. The heat puts the absolute lie to its title, because neither partner feels anything close to heat or at least the right kind of heat in these lyrics, and the songs make that sort of sexual frustration the furthest thing from tolerable. And then Accelerate tries to use a series of car metaphors to describe sex. And let me make this clear, Jungle's not in the right wheelhouse here. They're not Springsteen, and hell, they're not even within spitting distance of Morrissey's Speedway, which is a really great song that does this sort of thing in a better way. There's no way they could have pulled this off. Then you have songs like Busy Earning, which takes a pretty solid groove and squanders it on this taunting, arrogant vibe I really didn't like. Drops is this drippy, poorly written and poorly mixed mess that pleads with the girl to come down from her high with no real good reason to do it. And Time is just this straight up sex jam that at least manages to work on that level, if only on that level. But the absolute worst song on this record is Julia, which features the chorus, "Julia, I don't know a thing about you. Soon enough, you'll be all I ever need." And yet the verses make it clear that she's just a girl to him, who presumably wants him, at least I hope so, and yet without warning, he can't do a thing without her? Isn't this exactly the sort of song that Weird Al parodied on Jackson Park Express just a few weeks ago? Do we really need another song in this vein? Now, thankfully, there are a few tracks that are actually pretty solid on this album and save it from a worse ranking, mostly in this sex hookup jam variety featuring some decent enough melodies and grooves. Platoon, Time, Son of a Gun, these are some decent enough songs, I didn't mind those, and I like the grooves on Busy Earning and Lucky I Got What I Want. That pretty much saved those songs. But here's the point, they're only really in this variety and only in this variety, with little to no depth beyond it. Sure, you don't need depth, but when your instrumentation can't hold up, you've got a problem. And for the most part, it doesn't exactly present an attractive view of your singers, who on half the tracks come across as needy, whiny, and a little insufferable. And on the other half of the tracks, they try to come across as arrogant sexual powerhouses. They're completely unconvincing in that role, and the tracks are even worse. Now, look, I get the feeling this record probably worked a little bit better in pieces than it does as a whole, because as it is, I'm not really all that impressed by it. Look, I kind of respect the production for being able to capture this varied sound so vividly, even if I found the sound not particularly likable. But outside of that, it's a 5 out of 10 at best, and barely a recommendation. Folks, you want decent disco in the mainstream now? There's a lot better stuff than this. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out this year or have already come out this year that you want me to talk about, I'm more than happy to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse. I'll see you next time.